Welcome to Lento English. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
One introduction. Canada is hosting a very important meeting. Foreign ministers from the group of 7 countries are gathering in southern Ontario. These countries include Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United States. Other nations like Australia, Brazil, and India are also sending their ministers. The meeting will last 2 days. These talks are crucial for the world and for the allied nations. However, this meeting begins with tension. There is disagreement among the allied nations. Tensions have grown between the United States and its longtime friends like Canada. Many countries have different ideas on big global issues. This makes the discussions difficult from the start. One big problem to discuss is trade. The United States has put special taxes, called tariffs, on some goods from Canada. This has created difficult relations. U.S. President Donald Trump has strong opinions on trade. He has stated his main focus is putting American safety first. This approach causes some friction with other G7 members. Another important topic is defense spending. President Trump wants allied countries to spend 5% of their gross domestic product (GDP) on defense each year. Not all countries agree with this. Some, like Canada and Italy, currently spend much less. This difference is a major point of contention among G7 members. Finally, ministers will discuss plans for global conflicts. 2 main wars are on the agenda: Ukraine and Gaza. Countries have different ideas on how to help Ukraine and end the fighting. There is also uncertainty about President Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan. Some G7 members want to recognize a Palestinian state, but others do not agree. These are very serious and complex issues. The foreign ministers face many challenging discussions. They must talk about trade, defense spending, and different plans for global conflicts. It will require hard work and much talking. The goal is to find common ground and make progress. This meeting in Canada is a crucial moment for allied nations to work together despite their differences. 2. The trade problem. The G7 meeting brought together important countries. One big problem they faced was trade. Relations between the U.S. and Canada were especially difficult. President Trump had put new taxes, called tariffs, on many goods from Canada. These tariffs made trade harder and more expensive for Canadian businesses. This action caused many disagreements between the 2 close neighbors. The situation became more tense because of an advertisement. The government of Ontario, a Canadian province, created an anti-tariff advertisement. This advertisement was shown in the United States. It spoke against the new taxes President Trump had placed on Canadian imports. When President Trump saw the advertisement, he became very unhappy and upset. Because of this advertisement, President Trump decided to stop trade talks with Canada. This action made the difficult trade relationship even worse. It showed the deep problems existing between the U.S. and Canada regarding trade. This decision complicated future discussions. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney soon spoke about the advertisement. He said sorry for the advertisement. Prime Minister Carney also stated that Canada was ready to start trade talks again. He hoped the United States would be ready soon too. He wanted to fix the trade issues and restart important discussions. Foreign Minister Anita Anand of Canada knew trade was a significant issue. She noted that a different minister in the U.S. government officially led trade matters. However, she still planned to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. President Trump had focused more on his complaints about other countries' trade policies. He seemed less focused on working together with G7 allies. Minister Anand explained that the relationship between Canada and the U.S. was complex. It had many different important issues, not just trade. She said there was continued work to do on trade, but there was also work to do on many other important issues outside the trade file. She felt the relationship needed to continue across all these different topics. This showed that the trade problem was one part of a larger, ongoing discussion between the two countries. 3. A big meeting. The day for the big meeting finally came. Foreign ministers from around the world traveled to southern Ontario, Canada. This was a very important summit for the Group of Seven, also known as the G7 countries. The air was full of expectation, as many difficult topics were on the agenda for discussion. This gathering was a key moment for international cooperation, bringing together powerful nations to address shared problems and differing viewpoints. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand was the host. She warmly welcomed all the important guests as they arrived. Among them was U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a central figure in the discussions. Other key ministers came from Britain, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. These 7 countries make up the G7, and their leaders had gathered to talk about global matters. Their presence showed the serious nature of the talks to come. But the meeting was not only for these 7 nations. Many other countries were also invited to join the talks, making the gathering even bigger and more diverse. Their foreign ministers arrived in Canada too. Important officials from Australia, Brazil, and India were there. Ministers from Saudi Arabia, Mexico, South Korea, South Africa, and Ukraine also came, adding many different perspectives to the discussions. Even the EU Foreign Chief, Kaja Kallas, attended. It was a truly wide meeting of world leaders, all coming together to share ideas and discuss challenges on a global scale. The summit officially started on a Tuesday morning. It was planned to continue for 2 full days, ending on Wednesday. Everyone knew that many hours of intense talks lay ahead. The discussions would cover a range of critical issues that affected people all over the world. These issues included how countries trade, how they keep their people safe, and how they deal with big conflicts far away. The goal was to find common ground and possible solutions, even if agreements were hard to reach among so many different nations. Before the main talks began, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio shared his thoughts publicly. He used social media to make a clear statement about America's goals for the summit. He wrote, "We are working on a wide range of important issues here, but we have one main focus. That focus is to put the safety and security of Americans first." His words set a serious tone for the start of the summit. They showed that each country came with its own interests and priorities, ready to present them at this big and important international meeting. The stage was set for the deep discussions to begin. 4. The cost of safety. The discussions at the G7 meeting were not just about trade. Another big problem was how much money countries spent on keeping themselves safe. This is called defense spending. President Trump had a clear demand for countries that are part of NATO. NATO is a group of allies that promise to help each other if one is attacked. President Trump wanted these countries to spend 5% of their country's total money, or gross domestic product, GDP, on defense every year. This demand was about making sure all allies paid their fair share for common safety. It meant more money for soldiers, military equipment, and training. The idea was to make the alliance stronger and safer for everyone. The cost of safety, he argued, needed to be shared more equally among all members. However, not all countries could easily meet this goal. For many, spending 5% of their GDP on defense was a big challenge. They also needed money for hospitals, schools, roads, and other important things for their people. This demand from President Trump created a lot of discussion. Some countries believed it was a fair request. They thought everyone should contribute more to shared defense. Others felt it was too much money to spend. They argued that their current spending was enough, or that they had other urgent needs for their budgets. The request for 5% was a big jump for some nations. Moving money from public services to defense is not an easy decision for any government. It often means less money for other important programs. This is why Canada and Italy, for example, found it difficult to quickly change their spending plans. They were two countries that spent less than the 5% goal. Canada's Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, spoke about this. She said that Canada understood the importance of defense spending. She made a promise that Canada would reach the 5% target. However, this would take a long time. Canada aimed to reach this goal by the year 2035. This long-term plan showed a commitment to the alliance, but also recognized the practical difficulties. It meant that for many years, Canada would still be below the target that President Trump had set. This difference in timelines added to the complexity of the discussions. The meeting showed that while all allies wanted safety, they had different ideas about how much it should cost. It was a test of unity, as leaders tried to balance national budgets with the demands of the alliance. The talk about defense spending was a key part of the summit, showing the real cost of ensuring peace and security for all. It highlighted the challenges countries face when trying to protect their citizens while also providing other vital services. 5. Two big wars. After discussions about money for safety, the ministers moved on to talk about other very important global problems. These problems were two big wars happening in the world. One was the war in Ukraine. The other was the conflict in Gaza. The countries in the G7 group had different ideas about how to deal with these wars. This made the talks difficult. At first, the ministers spoke about the war between Russia and Ukraine. Most G7 countries wanted to help Ukraine a lot. They wanted to stop the war. Britain made a big announcement. It said it would send £13 million to Ukraine. This money was for a special reason. It would help fix Ukraine's power, heating, and water systems. Winter was coming soon, and Russia was attacking Ukraine more often. Britain's foreign minister said that Russia wanted to make Ukraine dark and cold. The money from Britain would help keep the lights on and homes warm for many people. Canada also said it would give similar help to Ukraine. Most G7 members were very strong in their opinions against Russia. They wanted Russia to end the war. However, President Trump had different thoughts about how to handle Russia and the war in Ukraine. This caused some disagreement among the allies. Next, the talks turned to the conflict in Gaza. This was another area where the G7 countries did not fully agree. President Trump had a plan for peace in Gaza. His plan was meant to create a ceasefire, which means a stop to the fighting. But there was a lot of uncertainty about this plan. Many people were not sure if it would work or if it would last. This made it hard for the G7 members to decide how to support it. Some G7 members had very different ideas about the situation in Gaza. For example, Britain, Canada, and France made an important announcement. They said they would recognize a Palestinian state. This means they would see Palestine as an independent country. They said they would do this even if the conflict between Israel and Hamas was not fully solved yet. This was a big point of difference within the G7 group. Not all countries agreed with this idea. The leaders had to work hard to find common ground on these very sensitive and complex issues. The future of both Ukraine and Gaza was a major focus, showing how important these discussions were for the world. 6. Talking in private. During the large G7 meeting, many important conversations happened. Not all talks were in big rooms with many people. Some of the most important discussions were held in private. Ministers met in smaller groups or one-on-one. These private talks helped them understand each other better and work through difficult problems. One such meeting was between Canada's Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, and the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. They met to talk about many things. Their countries share a long border and a long history, so their relationship is very important and has many parts. Minister Anand explained that their relationship is not just about trade. It has many different touch points. She said that work was needed on trade, but also on many other issues. These issues bring her and Secretary Rubio together. The friendship between their countries must continue across all these different topics. During one of their earlier meetings, Secretary Rubio asked Minister Anand for Canada's help. He wanted Canada to play a special role. President Trump had a plan for a ceasefire in Gaza. Secretary Rubio wanted Canada to help bring other countries to the table. He hoped this would make President Trump's Gaza plan work for a long time. This included discussions about how to rebuild Gaza in the future. It was a big request, showing the trust between the two nations. These private discussions were very important. They allowed leaders to speak openly and find ways to cooperate. Even with many disagreements, these private moments helped keep the lines of communication open. They were essential for moving forward on global issues like the situation in Gaza and the broader relationship between the United States and Canada. The ministers knew that finding solutions often starts with quiet talks, away from the main stage. 7. Finding an answer. The diplomats worked hard to find answers. They talked for many hours, hoping to find common ground on important world issues. But reaching agreements was not easy. Many difficult problems stood in their way, touching on how countries interact and how they approach global peace. One big challenge was trade. Countries had different ideas about how to buy and sell goods fairly. Some leaders felt that current trade rules were not balanced, causing tension. Discussions about trade were very hard, especially between North American neighbors. They struggled to find a way forward that pleased everyone. Another important topic was safety and defense spending. One powerful leader asked allied countries to spend a much higher amount on their militaries. They wanted a specific spending target. However, not all countries could agree. Some nations, like Canada and Italy, were still far from reaching the requested amount. This disagreement added to the difficulties in the room. The foreign ministers also discussed two major conflicts happening in the world. Countries had different views on how to help end these wars and bring peace. For the war in Ukraine, some wanted more aid for energy systems. For the conflict in Gaza, there were different ideas about a lasting peace plan. Some members also wanted to recognize a Palestinian state. These different approaches made finding one clear, shared path difficult. Canada, as the host country, played an important role. Its foreign minister worked hard to bring everyone together and keep discussions going. She met with other ministers, trying to build understanding. She explained that relationships between countries are complex, with many parts needing attention. She also helped with efforts for a lasting peace plan in Gaza, trying to get more countries to support it. Even though finding full agreements was difficult, the talks continued. The diplomats knew that dialogue was important, even with strong disagreements. They had to keep speaking to each other openly. They needed to understand different viewpoints. The meetings showed that working together is a long and challenging process. It takes much time and effort to find solutions, but the search for answers would continue. 8. The way forward. The foreign ministers from the G7 nations and other invited countries finished their talks in southern Ontario. They met for 2 days to discuss important global issues. The main topics were how much money countries spend on defense, trade problems, and plans for the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. These talks were not easy. There were many strong disagreements among the allies. The meeting showed the big challenges facing the alliance. Under current pressures, the G7 alliance faced difficult times. President Trump's demands on trade and defense spending caused much trouble. His focus on America's safety first sometimes made cooperation harder. Countries had different ideas for solving global problems. For example, Canada promised to reach 5% of its GDP for defense by 2035. Britain and Canada also planned to send money to help Ukraine's energy. But there were still different ideas about the Gaza ceasefire plan and recognizing a Palestinian state. Some countries, like Britain, Canada, and France, said they would recognize a Palestinian state even without a full end to the conflict. The meeting showed that international cooperation is difficult. Each country has its own interests, and leaders have strong ideas. Finding common ground takes much effort, especially when there are strong national interests at play. The discussions highlighted the need for careful talks and ongoing conversations to bridge differences. The foreign ministers understood that the world has strong leaders and different ideas for their own nations. This makes working together harder. Despite the difficult talks and the remaining disagreements, the foreign ministers understood the need to continue working together. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand noted that the relationship between countries has many important points. She said that work must continue on all these issues, not just trade. The ministers showed a commitment to keep talking. The G7 meeting ended with a clear understanding of the big tasks ahead. While some progress was made on specific aid packages and future goals, many important questions remained. The path forward for the G7 alliance will need continued talks, patience, and a willingness to understand different national interests. The leaders know that working together, even when hard, is necessary for global safety and security.